I'd like to introduce our newest sponsor, Swim Angelfish. Swim Angelfish is an online certification program that strengthens your teaching curriculum to serve swimmers of all abilities. Swim Angelfish will prepare you and your instructors with the skills to teach swimmers with autism, physical disabilities, anxiety, sensory and motor conditions, and more. Learn to teach skills faster and with more comfort with Swim Angelfish. Apply for an Only Alpha Pool Product Scholarship and receive up to 50% off your certification. Go to swimangelfish.com today to apply. Looking to host your first swim meet or replacing an old timing system? Run a swim meet with ease from your laptop using Superior Swim Timing. You can use Superior Swim Timing with your existing equipment, or they can provide you with a complete timing solution, including deck harnesses, buttons, and starter. SST is fully compatible with High-Tech and Team Unify, as well as Colorado, Daktronics, and Amiga touchpads. Go to superiorswimtiming.com to learn more, and be sure to tell them I sent you. All right, Brenton Rickard, how are you, mate?
Good, Hawke. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. It's been too long, mate. I've been away in this foreign land too long. I need to get home and see people.
Yeah. Well, you've been over there for a while, and I mean, I've been retired for 8 years now as well. So it's not like I'm day to day in the sport either.
Yeah. Well, listen, mate. We are getting together because of good news, bad news, I guess. You know, you got a story that just kind of popped in the swimming world, and we want to go over it. But you know, just out of respect for you and your career, I want to talk about it after we talk about, you know, yourself and all the work you put in and all the success you had, because I just think it's too important. And I don't want to start at the negative. I want to start at the positive. And so I guess, you know, last time we really spent time together was my last team and your first team in 2006 Commonwealth Games, mate. Was that the first time you really broke onto the Australian scene in a major international?
It was probably the first time I had big time success. I actually had a couple teams prior to that. So I was in 03 World Champs in Barcelona. Missed the Athens team, which is never fun. As anyone that's missed an Olympic team, you know, I was Australian record holder at that time going into trials, and kind of choked and blew it at trials and missed the team by a tenth or two of a second, and then kind of got myself back together and made 05 Worlds, but didn't really put it together at World Champs. And then 06 happened, and you know, won a number of medals at Com Games, and then went to Pan Pacs and was second behind Brendan Hansen and in front of, you know, Kazuki Kitajima got third. So that was kind of the first time I had a race the big boys and had a good result. So 06 was probably my breakout party, if you put it that way. But obviously our home Commonwealth Games, it was obviously a fitting way to end your career. But for a lot of us, it was our first taste of big time swimming in front of an Australian crowd. So pretty special for a lot of us.
Yeah, when I look back on that, it was such a great meet. And, I knew going in that that was going to be my last meet. And I don't know whether I ended that the way I wanted to end it. I'm much rather kind of just go out and just say that was it rather than kind of planning ahead to that being it. And so it kind of felt a little weird that I'd already knew that was it going into the meet, and it kind of made my teammates weird in the whole situation and just felt a little too special. It was like, let's not get carried away here. But I actually had more interaction as a younger kid with your brother. Nathan and I kind of grew up together and were competitors against each other. He was a sprint freestyler, so he didn't have the breaststroke gene like you, mate. But your older brother was a top class swimmer. Actually had the Australian record in the 50 free for a few years. So that's how I kind of became acquainted with you.
And I mean, it was a pretty special experience. Like, although I probably had some lean years through those teenage years when you're waking up every morning to go to training and you've got someone on the Australian swim team, a national record holder, doing the same thing, being a living, breathing example of what it takes to make it to the big time. It was pretty special for me, and I do credit him for, a large part of my career success was, I guess, him setting an example for me to follow, and I guess also seeing the challenges that he faced in his career, and I guess preparing myself to hopefully deal with them or avoid them, and I guess extend my career longer than he was able to.
Yeah. Well, you were swimming around the time, kind of the golden age of breaststroke, really. I mean, like you said, you just named a couple of athletes. And talk about some of your other competitors, people that you were competing against at the time, that kind of household names.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Kazuki is still the benchmark. Right. He obviously swam over a very long period of time, from Sydney all the way through. And so, you always knew you're up for a hard competition. He wasn't an overly big guy, even for a breaststroker, but he had incredible, power to weight ratio and efficiency. Brendan Hansen and I mean, the Americans had great breaststrokers for a number of years. Mm-hmm. Ed Moses, when we were doing World Cups and World Short Course, was phenomenal in that regard, and Brendan was great in the long course pool as well. And then you kind of progressed, and I remember I think it was a Man Ostrom one year meeting Alexander Dale Owen, this swimmer from Norway. I mean, who knew Norway had such great swimmers who tragically passed away before London. But he was a great competitor when you got in the pool, but just a great friend out of it. And then there was, some of the other guys, the Commonwealth Games guys, like we always had quality fields at Commonwealth Games when you had, Cameron Vanderberg,
right,
Michael Jamieson, Olympic silver medalist as well. These guys, Mike Brown, I think, beat me at Melbourne in the 200 breast. So I was always used to having, great competitors, and then domestically, I had Christian Springer, who's a world champion and Olympic silver medal in his own right. So yeah. I think the fact that here in Australia, I raced a world class guy, probably 20 times a year because we lived in the same city for a big chunk of it. We raced Queensland state titles together, all these meets here, as well as our national championships. Prepared you that when you finally, went international and raced those guys, you were at least prepared. You were at that level where you were competitive. And so, yeah, I looking back, I had a number of years, probably from 06 through to 2012, where I was there or thereabouts. Sometimes you get it right and you get the shiny medal, and sometimes you're just that little bit off. But I look back and go, there was a level of consistency that I'm pretty proud of with that.
Yeah, for sure. Over many years. Did you train with Vince Raleigh throughout your whole career?
No, I must have joined Vince when I was about 11, and swam with him up until 25. So that was after the 2009 World Champs, Rome, where I won. And I'd kind of planned that was going to be my last year with Vince. So a bit to your point earlier, when it's a plan, it sometimes feels a bit weird that this will be the last meet. But for me, it really, I guess, focused me and motivated me that was going to be the last meet I swam with Vince, and my results probably reflected that it was a great preparation. And then I moved back home to Queensland, and I swam with Glen down the Gold Coast. So
right.
I was with Bakes for the last, whatever that was, 4 years of my career. 2010 to 2013, which very, very different coaches. But I'm incredibly glad I did it. I think, I don't know whether I would have swum as long as I did if I didn't move to Glen. He had a special knack of keeping things fresh and challenging and elongating my career. But also I do credit Vince. Vince was, the person that made me into the athlete I became. When you kind of swim with someone for 15 years from 11 or so to mid-20s, they certainly help mold you as a person, as well as an athlete.
Done a couple of interviews now with some Aussies, and it seems like that was fairly common, especially for Queenslanders, to have a coach that coached them from a very young age. The Campbell sisters were the same thing, kind of all the way through their careers. So I'm hearing that more and more often, but certainly a change is as good as a holiday, so that change was probably needed at 25, even though you did end up winning the world championship that year. Vince is probably like, oh, great, I get him to the world championship now, and he's going to take off now. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of crazy. But you had success at world champs, winning the gold medal, and also at the Olympic Games, winning the silver medal. How much did you lose the gold by at the Olympics in the 200?
Oh, I can't remember. It was a little bit like Kitajima was fairly dominant that year. So right. I think he might have gone maybe 8 low. I went 2:08.88, which the Chinese loved because 8 is a very auspicious number in Chinese culture. So I was apparently on the back page of the Beijing news about how special it was that this person went 8.88. But I mean, he was, he won the 100, but was probably a bit more dominant in that too. So I was, in the ballpark, but he was a cut above, and likewise we won a silver in the medley relay at the end of the meet, and we had a pretty good team between, I think, the 3 other guys won an individual medal in their respective hundreds, but the Americans were too good. So my little piece of sporting history was, when Michael was receiving his 8th gold medal, I was on that second podium. So me and those 3 guys, that's something that you kind of look back and go, that's pretty special to be a part of. It would have been a better story if we were on the top podium and he was bumped to silver. But to be there in that moment, and to see what he did over the week, like I won that silver medal in the 200 breaststroke, and I couldn't sleep or stop smiling for about 48 hours afterwards. And meanwhile, he's gone race after race after winning. So the respect I have for him to be able to do that's just immense.
That's what Andrew Lauderstein said to me too. He's like, I won the bronze medal in the 100, and that was it. I was off. I was happy as you could be. And he's like, Michael's going back to back to back, and it's like just a different mentality, I guess. But where did you feel most comfortable, in the 100 or the 200?
The 100 was my favorite event. Really, I only started swimming the 200 very seriously after missing the team in 2004. That kind of disappointment pushed me to go, all right, well, I don't want to just rely solely on the 100. When the next game comes around, I want to have 2 cracks at making the team, but when I go, I want to have two chances to try to win a medal, basically, or 3 chances if you include the medley relay. So, in the space of 4 years, I went from not really swimming the event to a Olympic silver medal, which is a credit to Vince to kind of putting that program together to help me swim that event the way I did. But I always found the 100 was my favorite event, but I also found it's a harder event to do perfectly. Like it's such a knife edge of being out fast, but being out, with that easy speed. If you overcook it, that first 50, the last 15 of 100 breasts gets very ugly. So finding that right balance of speed, but easy speed is, I think harder in the 100. In the 200, it's all about rhythm and length and that type of thing. Whereas the 100, you got to stay up in the water and nice and fast, but you can't overcook it.
Yeah. I want to talk about 100 speed and Adam Peaty in a second. We'll come back to that. But I missed the team in 96 and had a similar experience to you, kind of like in 04, and then came back a much better athlete, much stronger, much wiser, better for the experience. It was certainly heartbreaking, but you kind of did the same thing. You obviously have this very consistent career after having this disappointment in 2004. So what would you say to anyone listening to this? What's your recommendation to maybe not have to go through that heartbreak? What were the changes that you made? What are the things you did in yourself?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, it's the one part of my career that you look back and go, man, I wish that didn't happen. But at the same time,
glad
if it didn't happen, I don't think I'd be the athlete I was. Yeah, so. Yeah. For me, it was probably two things. It was an element of professionalism. I think up until that point, I was still effectively an age group swimmer.
Right.
In my late teens, kind of good when I was good, and when I wasn't good, I was terrible. So it was more about, every day I'd bring a level of focus, professionalism, consistency to training that then meant if I got up on race day and it was a bad swim, I knew it would still be good. If I'm good on my bad days, then I can be good on any day. So that was probably one. One of it was a little bit about my mentality on race day, that I think when I look back to 04, I was thinking ahead. I was thinking, I'm gonna get to be an Olympian. I'm gonna be, how good is this going to be? Athens, the home of the games, all this stuff.
Right.
Rather than thinking about, well, today I'm at training and what am I going to do today that's going to make me better? But also, I guess on race day, don't think about results. You think about your process. So I guess my pre-race mantra almost became, as we walked out, I just think to myself, I'd consciously say to myself, you're about to swim fast. That's why you do this. That's the funnest thing you can do.
Yeah. And
that just made me stop thinking about winning, losing, time splits, whatever.
All right.
Settled me down and got me ready to race, because I love swimming fast. I love seeing what I could do compared to the guy next to me. And so just reminding myself of that was a big change to, I guess, where my head was in 04. And that then helped pretty much every race day from then to the end of my career. So probably those two changes. But I mean, yeah, to me, it's about if talking to a young swimmer or whoever, it's about, using your opportunity that day to do what you can. Some days you're going to feel great, go kill it. Other days you're going to feel average, but that doesn't mean you just phone it in. You've still got to find a way to develop something, whether that's, your skills, whether that's your underwaters, whether that's your, not breathing last 10 meters or whatever it might be. Every day is an opportunity to improve, and that'll ultimately lead to success.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Good advice, mate. Couldn't have said it any better myself. When did you, was 2012 your last meet?
No, I swam on. So after 2012, I ummed and ahed a bit, and ultimately decided I want to have another crack. And I basically dropped the 200. I was, I guess, 29 by then, right. A bit long in the tooth. The body was starting to struggle. So I said, let's just go back, do purely sprint training and see if I can, put together a great 100 on its own.
I don't know the result of that, but that's just a bad idea from just straight off the bat. So keep going. What happened with that result?
It was hard. I had the toughest year leading into trials that I'd ever had, like injuries,
right?
Inflamed discs in my back, these type of things. And it was just a battle. I actually swam trials with a 6 centimeter tear in my groin, and kind of scraped through the team on one leg. And and kind of went, all right. And then I had quite a good period from trials to world champs. And I kind of went, oh, this has come good. I've got the balance right. The body's kind of adjusted a bit to going back to sprint training, and I think this might work. And then I just had one of those meets where the heat swim wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good, and I missed the semi-final by 100th of a second. I think between third and it must have been fourth and 17th in the heats was like 60.1 to 60.4. And it was just like this incredibly tight field. And I was just on the outside of that. And so I didn't get a semi swim. And then the same thing happened in the 50. And then the relay, they were worried. So they wanted to swim Christian. It was the year Christian Springer won the world title. So they wanted to put him in both the heat and the semi.
Sure.
And so it was like my meet finished on day 3, I think, after the 50 heat. And I kind of just had a few days thinking about it, going, do I want to? I know I could have done better than that. The time I did and the result I got wasn't nearly what I should have got. But it was like, do I want to spend another 12 months risking dealing with those injuries, dealing with all the fatigue I kind of felt having swum for as long as I had, to do it again. And I just kind of went, no, that's it. So while I hadn't gone into the meet thinking it was my last meet, I quite wanted to swim the next year's Commonwealth Games, and Pan Pacs were here on the Gold Coast, and have that as my final meet in 2014. But I just kind of called it on the last night in Barcelona in 2013 and said, look, guys, I'm done. So I'm glad I did it then, and then the way to do it to do it with the team there, I think is quite special, as you did, rather than announcing it 2 weeks later when you're at home. But yeah, it was a tough year, and I was just like, I don't necessarily want to try to put myself through that again.
Did you have some kind of plan what you were going to go into after that, or was it just like, I'm done and I got to figure out the rest now?
No, I was quite lucky. So I'd actually started working part-time for the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games in that year.
Oh, okay.
So when I first moved up to the Gold Coast in 2010, they did the bid process, and I was an athlete ambassador for the bid. So I got to meet the crew, who, the chairman and the CEO and all these people, and what they were trying to do, and learning about the process, I guess kind of piqued my interest. I hadn't, if you'd asked me 2008, do you see yourself working at major sporting events, I would have said, no, it wasn't really my plan, but it kind of fell that way. And so after the London Olympics, I'd kind of finished all my study, and the guys asked me in to kind of brief the small team that were working at the games at that stage on my London experience and what the London Games I thought did well and that type of thing. And while I was there, someone said, oh, when you hang them up, what do you think you want to do? And I said, actually, now that I've seen what you guys do, I'd actually be really interested in working at the games. And they basically said, do you want to start?
Brilliant.
We can put you on. I think I was only doing, 12 or 15 hours a week or something pretty small while I was swimming, but it kind of piqued my interest enough that then when I kind of retired, I kind of had a few months to decompress after Worlds, and then started full-time by the end of that year, and then worked whatever it was, the 4.5 years to Games time.
Nice. Very nice. I just want to jump back real quick because I've never had a chance to really ask a competitor of Cameron's this, but 2012, Cameron came out, won the Olympics in the 100 breast, I believe, and there was a little bit of controversy where he kind of openly admitted to taking some dolphin kicks. What did you think about that as one of the competitors?
Look, the dolphin kick is just one of those things that it's been an issue my whole career. Like if you think back to Athens and there was a storm around it there, and the rule basically got changed to allow one dolphin kick.
Right.
And then once there was one dolphin kick, a few people started taking a liberty and doing a second one. To me, I'm not going to point the finger at people and say, you shouldn't have done this or you should have done this. For the record, he broke my world record by 0.12 of a second in that race, and people questioned about, how much, a tenth of a second is an extra. So, and as I said, it to me, I don't worry myself with what other people do. I would never do it. It's not within the spirit of the sport, I don't think. And more so, it's one of those things when I get up in the blocks, I want to test myself against what the world's got to offer. And so I'm going to do what I do in the way I think it should be done. And if other people want to try to bend the rules or whatever, so be it.
Were you in that race?
Yeah, I think I was 5th or 6th in the end. My semi-swim was quite good, but my final swim was a little bit slow and kind of dropped me down from kind of fighting for a bronze medal down to, I think, 5th or 6th. But I mean, he made the point that, a year before at World Champs, he gets beaten by someone that does it to him. So, each to their own. If that's the way you want to try to win, go be it. I mean, I think he was half a second up on the silver medalist. So why you would risk a disqualification for a tenth of a second when you're the best person in the race? I don't know.
Right, like it was almost like he was going to win the race anyway. He didn't really need to add a second dolphin kick. It was like you're the best guy there anyway. So I guess that helps you kind of live with the result anyway, knowing that look, he was pretty much the best guy on the day anyway, but it wasn't really necessary.
If he beat me by 100th of a second,
right,
you might feel a little bit differently, but ultimately he was the best swimmer in that race. Well, yeah,
and leave it at that. Okay. Breaststroke these days, mate. Does it blow your mind? I mean, you're swimming really fast, breaking world records. I think your world record was 58.58.
Yeah.
There's some balance there too, mate. 58. But these days, I mean, that doesn't even get on the podium. I mean, it's just crazy. And just talk to me about Adam Peaty, first of all.
I don't know about you, but sometimes after I retired, you kind of go, oh, geez, I wish I'd, should I get back in there?
I'm still,
And then you watch Adam race and I retired at the right time. So I think it's a bit of a change in philosophy more than anything. When I swam, and you watch guys like Kitajima, it was very much about distance per stroke, stroke length and efficiency, trying to have good speed like that. Whereas I think people realise, you lose so much energy speeding up, slowing down. You're better off rating up, maintaining speed for as long as you can. And I mean, he's a special athlete. Like there's no way around that. I don't think there's been periods of domination in too many events like he's had probably from 2014 to today, and whether that continues on. But I think that change in mindset then allows you to train and prepare a different way to then do that. I mean, if I got up and tried to swim like Adam Peaty, even when I was at my best, it would probably get ugly. But I think if you train that way, knowing that was how you were going to swim it, you could probably find a way of making it work. But it's not just that he's so good as that now guys like Kaminga, they're finding a way to get down to that, not quite his speed, but closer and closer to that kind of territory.
What about the breaststroke kick itself, the evolution of that? I mean, there are guys that are barely kind of separating their legs anymore and just shooting straight back and doing all sorts of strange stuff with it. And Peaty's got that very short piston type, lever, just bang, bang, bang. I mean, it's really mind blowing to see where it's gone, from kind of 08 to now. It's just almost like it's a different sport.
Yeah, I think people realize, in our time, it was so much about getting that power.
Right.
Whereas now there's almost an emphasis on the recovery, that you actually, what you're trying to do is do that as shortly as possible, because that's the resistance that's slowing you down. So you're trying to almost keep that short and just, like you say, just bang them out like short little pistons, just turning your ankles out, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think we always talked about, keeping kicks narrow and really trying to drive to the back wall, but these guys have once again taking it to another level and doing it much more tempo based. Like I don't know too much about how they train, but I doubt they'd be doing too much slow, long, efficient breaststroke kick. It'd be more about
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, short and sharp.
Mate, I know very little about breaststroke, and it just seems like just when I get a grasp of maybe figuring it out, it changes again and it becomes something different. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know what's going on anymore. It's hard to explain it.
But I think that's part of what makes breaststroke special. If you ask me, like, you look at the 100 free and 7 of the 8 guys look identical. I would argue, like, everyone swims it very similarly.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at breaststroke and it's much more about, well, as a human, what are my physical attributes and how do I make the most of that? I had the pleasure of going up probably, what was that, 2018, 2019, and spending some time with Vince working with Zac Stubblety-Cook.
Right.
And seeing what he can do versus what I can do, and speaking to Vince about, the difference in training him versus training me. We did the same stroke. We did the same event. He's now Olympic champion. I was an Olympic silver medalist in the same event. But we're just such different physical creatures that you can't train us the same way at all. Yeah. Like, we might do some sets that are similar, but you're going about it completely differently.
Give us that. Zac's obviously being coached by your former coach. So is he doing any Brenton Rickard sets that have helped him become Olympic champion?
He does a fair bit of sets I used to do. But
talk to me about one. Give me one.
But speaking to him, like, I'd do that as like the only breaststroke I would do in the session. And he'll do that, and then he'll go swim another 2K of breaststroke afterwards and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, my body could not handle that. Like, he can just swim breaststroke all day, and you see it the way he swims. And he's almost like a metronome. He can sit there and bang out, that type of, I think all these 50s in the 200 from 50s 2 to 4 were all 32 lows. Like, just being able to maintain that even under fatigue is just special.
Is there a set that you can share with us, like something that you know is similar to what you used to do, but he does that now?
We did a fair bit of, for me, especially taking on the 200 was a lot about rating and rhythm. Right. So I do a lot of like 200 meter pace work at 35 to 37 stroke rate, 16 strokes of 50. If they were 50s, I'd be doing 32 flats, or trying to go 105s or 106s for 100. So you might do something where you go dive 100 at that type of rate, 200 easy, push 100, 200 easy, and you do that. You do 4 times, so it's almost like 4 broken 2s.
Right.
And the 200 easy was on like 3 minutes. It's not easy. It's like an aerobic, semi short rest type swim. And he obviously swims it up at a higher rate, but he's doing 104s, 103s, just back to back to back. And I'd kind of, first 2, 3 would be good, and then I'd kind of hit my limit of that's about as much breaststroke at that speed and as efficiency as I could do. Whereas he does 4, and then he's like, what's next? So just a machine.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, awesome stuff, mate. Well, listen, I got to tell you, the first 30 minutes is far more interest to me than the next part of this talk's going to be. You do retire, and you do kind of leave the sport for a while, in terms of, you've been gone from the swimming pool for 7-8 years, I think, something like that. You're still involved in the sport, but it was around last year I was actually coaching one of your former teammates, Matt Targett, and Matt comes to practice and says, we got a problem. I'm like, well, what's wrong? He's like, Brenton Rickard's just failed a drug test. I was like, Brenton Rickard retired 7 years ago. What are you talking about? I was like, yeah, they've gone back and tested something from London. So that was how I found out about it from Matt Targett. How did you find out about it, mate?
Mate, I got it. It was a Monday morning in January 2020, and I got an email it was actually from the Australian Olympic Committee as a Olympic test. It goes through the IOC, and they passed it on to me. And I, like, when you see it and the subject heading's a bit weird, like you just don't even think, you don't realise what you're about to open. And sure enough, it's an email explaining that a retest of a 2012 sample has come back positive for furosemide, a banned diuretic. And
you've probably never heard of before.
I'd heard of it only because of other cases that I don't know whether you remember Kylie Palmer's case.
Okay.
Kind of came around 2015, I think that was. And even then, I didn't initially trigger. It was only after the fact, when I actually got on the Google machine, that I kind of saw that and kind of went, oh, okay, same thing. So yeah, and then it's just disbelief. You think you're double checking the sample numbers. If they've got something wrong, has something gone mixed up in the lab? You just don't believe it's real. And then you kind of spend probably 2 days scrambling, speaking to whoever you've got in your network that knows a little bit about this doping system to know what the hell's what's going on, what's going to happen, where do we go from here? And yeah, it's just a tough situation to be in. I tell the story pretty early on. There was a professional in the anti-doping realm here, a specialist that I kind of spoke to, and they said, mate, you're not going to be able to prove the source of the contamination 8 years after the fact. Plead no contest, buy each of the boys a Rolex for their medals and just move on. Like the cost to you financially and emotionally, however long this case takes, is going to be much more than anything you can imagine, and you're still going to struggle to actually prove your innocence through it all, just because there is no physical evidence. You've got nothing to show to say this is how it happened. So when you kind of get told that, your heart sinks.
Yeah.
You get it shakes you to your core a bit about, well, what can I do?
And that was part of the deal, right? Is it wasn't just affecting you. Is the test was part of the Medley Relay, and you had swum in the morning, and then the Medley Relay had gone on and won a bronze medal. So they were talking about actually taking the medals away from all the boys who had won.
Yeah. So the test itself was after the 200 breast final. So I got 7th, I think, or something. Okay. Not great. It wasn't a great swim. But because 2 days later I swam the heats of the Medley Relay,
gotcha.
The position is that you disqualify all results at the event, not just the event that the test happened. So yeah, you disqualify my swim in the Medley Relay heats, and then by FINA rules, if one swimmer is disqualified, the whole team's disqualified. So yeah, you kind of sit there and go, you found an absolutely tiny trace of a non-performance enhancing diuretic with no evidence of any wrongdoing, yet you're going to take an Olympic medal off 6 people. Like, in terms of how harsh a punishment can you possibly hand down, that's kind of at the top of the list. So you kind of spend months. Well, the other thing that's probably worth noticing is that my B sample didn't get tested for 4.5 months, I think, in the end. So I didn't even know whether I legitimately had a case to answer because the lab got shut down in Lausanne because of COVID. So I kind of said, well, can you test my B sample is this just a contamination that's happened in my A sample bottle or something like that? And you just have to sit with it. This weight hanging around your neck for months at a time, waiting to hear, what's going to happen? Is this real? Do I have to take this to CAS? And how am I possibly going to prove my innocence?
Is there any form of support during that time, or do you feel completely isolated other than family, obviously? But I mean, professionally, is there a sense of isolation? Do people pull away from you and be like, okay, he's going to have to prove that on his own? Or is there a group of people that come around you and say, hey, man, we'll get you back on this?
I think friends and family do have your back. Sure. But outside of that, there's very little people can do to support you. I mean, the rules here in Australia are so anti-doping that if anytime you're, I guess, accused of a violation, it's basically a hands-off policy. They'll point you to a psychologist and say, speak to them for help, and that's about it. And it's somewhat of a problem with the system globally that you're guilty until you can prove your innocence, and therefore everyone just has to keep you at arm's length. And so professionally, like post Gold Coast Games, I started consulting and contracting. So I was working for the Swimmers Association, the Australian Swimmers Association at the time, doing some work for them. And so the day that I kind of find out, I kind of had to call them and say, look, I don't think I can't do my job.
Wow.
Under this regime, under this system. So basically there and then, I think initially I asked for a leave of absence to see whether I could sort it out, but it was pretty obvious quickly that it was going to take a while. So you just basically have to resign there and then. And so for me, yes, there's the damage to my reputation as an athlete, but as a professional now in the sporting industry, it's been a bigger challenge than that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine, the decisions you have to make in a situation like that. Did they come to you? Did anyone come to you kind of at a point? I know you gave an example a minute ago, but was there a point where it's like, look, man, this is going to cost you X amount of dollars. It's just not something that you're going to win here. I mean, did they give you any of that advice, or did they give you a ballpark of how much it was going to cost?
Yeah. And to be fair, we kind of knew that in the grand scheme of things, my legal fees weren't going to be as extreme as others because, you look at a Shayna or a Roland Schumann or one of these guys that spend a whole lot of money testing, trying to find the contamination. I couldn't do that. Like, so in terms of costs,
right.
Mine was probably at the lower end of it. But yeah, you get a ballpark figure. I think what we didn't understand was how long this process would take. It's been 19 months since I was first notified, that between the B sample delay and everything else that's gone on, that's probably been the price that I've paid that I felt the most. The money is certainly something. It certainly left the bank balance worse for wears, but to have to carry this burden for 19 months has been a bigger cost. But yeah, I mean, pretty early on, we knew it would be incredibly hard to prove my innocence. We did feel there was, speaking to the legal team, there was an argument to be made that could at least protect the relay boys.
Okay.
And so that was the main reason we fought it. And, I think either way, I felt I owed it to myself and to them and to the sport as a whole that I had to fight it. I don't want to be sitting here in 5 years' time going, yeah, look, it did cost me some money, but I saved myself some money by not contesting, but I'm living with accepting a bum steer for the rest of my life. So I always felt like I had to do it purely out of the desire of the peace of mind that knowing I did everything I could to clear my name.
Yeah. I did read somewhere it said trace amounts of oral pharmaceutical products, over-the-counter pharmaceutical products can be a reason why they have this drug in them. Did you guys come to any conclusions on that throughout this time? Like, what was your argument?
Yeah, it was basically that there were numerous cases coming up around the world that now with this new testing regime of how low of a concentration they can go to,
right,
that diuretics were popping up in samples as contaminants for legitimate medications. So over-the-counter medications, paracetamol, ibuprofen, those type of things. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That their quality control measure is, good manufacturing practice as defined by the pharmaceutical bodies is 10 parts per million, and they're pinging us for parts per billion in our urine. So
wow.
you can have something that's produced legally and safely and meets all regulation, is a legitimate pharmaceutical product, medication, and if you just take it and you're statistically one of those unfortunate ones that is slightly contaminated and you have it at the wrong time close to one of these tests,
right,
yeah, you end up pinging positive. So that's what kind of ultimately led to the rule change, to avoid this happening to future athletes.
What did they do with the rule change? So from you, they then decided to change the rules?
Yeah, so my case and other similar cases basically put forward enough evidence of these things happening enough,
right,
that they needed to investigate it, and in their investigation they found, these small low-level contaminations that are legal in a pharmaceutical sense lead to low-level concentrations in urine samples. So they've now put a minimum reporting level of 20 nanograms per mil. So mine was 6, which is still a very small amount, to be fair, but they're kind of saying, look, that should hopefully avoid situations of contaminations flagging with these diuretics, that if you have a concentration above that, it's probably from taking it purposefully rather than it just being in a legitimate medication.
So how did you ultimately get off this in terms, was that just it? It was basically like, look, there's multiple cases here. Here's all the evidence. Is that how it ended up, you finally getting, coming off this?
It was ultimately that WADA reviewed all this stuff and changed the rule. And therefore the IOC then comes back to CAS and say, the rule now states that it needs to be 20 nanograms per mil or greater to be a doping violation. Brenton's test is no longer considered an adverse analytical finding. We dropped the case against him. And so we that rule was published late May to come into effect June 1. So I've known for a little while that this would be the outcome. But it was just then the legal process going through for CAS to review the withdrawal, finalise it for their processes, that has taken, another 3 months effectively of once again of having to carry the burden, even though the result is ultimately going to go your way. So
you weren't even allowed to tell the relay boys that they get to keep their medals?
I think they were notified because they were parties that joined the case as impacted parties. So they actually came in,
okay.
Had a lawyer and a few of the boys attended the hearing or part of the hearing as an impacted party. Okay. They were then privy to the conversations going on with CAS through their lawyer. So I'm pretty sure they knew whenever that was, end of May, but same as me, that they're bound by the confidentiality of the arbitration agreement until it's finalised, which has been 3 more months.
Wow. So you had a party back in May, and then you've had a couple of parties in the last few days. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. Well, like my experience with the system is certainly you don't believe it until it's real. So right. As excited as I was back in May until this notification came through, whenever that was, Tuesday, Monday night, you don't let yourself hope too much. You kind of got to wait till you've got the official documentation in your hot hands.
Yeah. God, mate, what an ordeal. I mean, there must have been periods of time where it did feel helpless for you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that it became evident early on that you're fighting a losing battle, or you certainly feel that way. And the isolation of it. I mean,
right.
You kind of, it's a bit of a tough situation that, you're afforded confidentiality, but you also know, well, we've had cases here in Australia where confidentiality of the athlete's been broken and the story's got out, Shayna Jack. Right. And so you deliberately want to tell as few people as possible to avoid a situation like that happening.
Right.
But then also you're in the situation where you feel like you're being dishonest to people is the easiest way to put it. That,
right.
What's a good example? Swimming Australia launching a new junior excellence program here on the Gold Coast. Brenton, can you come down and do stuff for the kids? And you're like, I can't tell you why, but no. So you end up not being able to be truthful with people because you're protecting yourself. So that isolation is, along with, I know I didn't do this. I know the truth of the matter, but how do you prove it? And how do you stop it from impacting other people, the relay boys, even just things like, my coaches, Vincent and Glen, you'd hate for this case to reflect badly on them, or any of those things. So you kind of just do what you can. In some ways, being an athlete sometimes doesn't prepare you overly well for life after sport, and then sometimes it does. And so being able to, I guess, put that athlete mindset back on and go, okay, what can I do today to help deal with this problem was one of the things that did help me get through.
Right. Well, mate, you got your clean record. You've been vindicated. Your home state has just been awarded the Olympics in 32 in Brisbane. So is this something where you could maybe attach to something like that and get back to work and start to do something like that again?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to think that my experience with the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games puts me in good stead to hopefully play a part in hosting a great Olympic Games in 2032. The hard thing is it's 11 years away, and so I've got to kind of get back to work and doing some other things in the meantime. But that's obviously on the horizon, and it's something we're all very excited about. Obviously, you got to experience a home games in Sydney, and I actually attended a little bit as a spectator as a teenager, and we'd love to see something as special as that happen again here in Brisbane in 32.
For sure, mate. For sure. Well, I'm glad we could do this today, mate. Glad we could catch up. Glad we could share your both your stories, the good and the bad, and then the way it's ended is a good thing for you and for your family and for Australia, the swimming community for sure. Because I know that they pride themselves in doing things the right way, and you're part of that for sure. You had so much consistency over so many years, and you're such a role model. So I'm glad you're able to clear your name now, mate. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, appreciate it, Hawke.
Yep. All right, mate. Well, listen, let's not wait another 10 years to catch up. You got my number now. So let's hopefully I'll come down and visit soon. I'd love to get down there. As long as you take that quarantine away, I'll be down there. So.
I think we're working on that. We get ourselves vaccinated here because that rollout's been a bit slow, but hopefully once that happens, we'll open things up a little more.
All right, Brenton, thanks, mate. Appreciate your time today.
Cheers, Hawke.
See you, mate.